green revolution. How can there be a green revolution without using the greenest plant on the earth?
My name is Jack Hare. I'm co-founder of HELP and Marijuana Prohibition. In 1973, Captain Ed Adair, who owned a countercultural store, Grateful Dead-like store in the San Fernando Valley, became my mentor. And we learned that from kids that would hang around there that marijuana was also known as a plant called hemp. And I thought, well, that was interesting. One night, Captain Ed and I stumbled upon an idea that hemp was the #1 source of paper, fiber, fuel, food on Earth of the 3 million plants. Forget smoking it. That historically, this plant had been known since time immemorial as man's #1 plant. All the paper. I never knew paper had been made from marijuana, been made from a plant called hemp. I never knew that virtually all clothing, all bed sheets, all homespun, that famous American homespun was all marijuana. 85–90% wasn't wool, wasn't cotton, wasn't jute or sisal or flax. It was hemp, marijuana. And all this has been kept out of my education. I went to public school, high school, and into college. I was a major in history. And I had never known that marijuana had ever been used for anything, let alone 85% of everything, for the last 10,000 years, right up until this century, and was the #1 thing known by kids 100 years ago that went to school. I use a dictionary, an encyclopedia, and the United States Government Department of Agriculture, because it's all there. More was written about cannabis, hemp, than all the other plants that we had, wheat and corn and barley and rice. More was written about hemp. Hemp was that important. It was virtually all our clothing. There are no known deaths from marijuana. You live longer, according to the Jamaican study, Costa Rica study, funded by the United States government, and American studies all done from the 1960s and early 70s, before they cut it off in 75. We live longer, the people that smoke pot, every day than people that don't do drugs at all. And 8 to 24 years longer than people that use alcohol and tobacco. You got to be out of your mind not to smoke pot once you know that information, and you got to be really mad at the government that's kept this information from you. Marijuana has some strange effects on people, but the worst of them that I know is you get the munchies, and you might put on some weight. I mean, nobody's dying from marijuana except the people that are shot by the government, shot by the politicians, giving police orders, and crazy parents who think that they're doing God's will by listening to these politicians without any documentation or proof that this is a dangerous drug. The #1 contributor to the Partnership for a Drug-Free America is Budweiser, the largest beer company in America, and then followed by other beer companies and pharmaceutical companies that want to keep the synthetics on the market. They want to keep those toxic medicines on the market. Henry Ford, in 1941, built an automobile completely out of hemp. And he did the windows and the body and every part of it except the engine out of hemp. He predicted that all cars would be made this way. It had 10 times the impact strength of steel. It was the finest plastic. Of course, hemp has the longest molecule. Hemp isn't just another plant. What I said before is it's greater than all the other plants that grow on Earth combined for paper, fiber, fuel, and it's the only one that grows it without pesticide or herbicide. You've got to be insane not to put this information into your children's minds, because to put any other information is you damning your children. You condemning your children to a life that's going to bring death for them and their children. The government's a liar. So this is not new. You can go into the encyclopedia, you can go into the dictionary, and you can go into the history of all the plants and come up with the greatest plant and the healthiest thing for the human race, and that's hemp, marijuana.
And now, Jack Hare.
It grows the biggest and the best and the fastest in the most soil and climate conditions and latitudes. It's the healthiest plant on the planet Earth. In fact, it's greater as paper, fiber, fuel, medicine, food, than virtually any other plant on Earth. And if you take out medicine, it's greater than all the other plants on Earth combined. This one plant, the plant that's against the law, hemp, is greater than all the other plants on Earth combined. You couldn't make as much paper, or better paper, or cheaper paper chemically than you can out of hemp. If you took every other annual plant on the planet Earth, you wouldn't equal hemp for paper. If you put it all together, wow, that's pretty heavy. And what plant leaves the ground the healthiest of all the plants that grow on the planet Earth? Wow, it's hemp again. Wow, that's pretty strange that they got hemp outlawed and it's the best paper source by far on Earth. You'd never need to cut down another tree. And then you find out about fiber. All of you gone back and you've touched the hemp fiber. You've worn hemp clothing. You've seen hemp around the last year or two. It wasn't around 10 years ago, 20 years ago. My partner and I were the only people I knew that had hemp clothing that we had imported from Indonesia. And we found out it was the softest fiber on the earth. the warmest fiber on the earth, the strongest, longest-lasting natural fiber on the earth. It grew the healthiest of all the fibers that grow on the planet Earth. Cotton, for instance, uses half of all the chemicals used on the planet Earth to fight pests and weeds. Boll weevils are used on one crop, half of all the chemicals put out by DuPont, Monsanto, and Dow to poison the earth, and there's lots of chemicals put out. Half of those chemicals are used on cotton. Hemp has no enemies. Hemp doesn't need any chemicals to make it grow, any chemicals to beat the enemies of hemp. There is no enemy of hemp except the incredible ignorance of our politicians and our police. So here you got the #1 paper industry on earth. Wait, not just #1, it's greater than all the other possibilities for making paper. If you put them all together, wouldn't even equal a few percentage points of hemp, and none of them are healthier. The healthiest, the biggest, the strongest, the longest-lasting cloth fiber on earth is also hemp. Wow. What can you think about next? Well, the #1 food source on the planet Earth, wouldn't you know it? The #1 food source on the earth is the hemp seed. The seed of hemp is the highest of all the 3 million foods on earth in usable protein.
Wow, man.
That's some statement. Not by smoking it. That's a minor issue. Would you believe that marijuana could replace most oil and energy needs? That marijuana could revolutionize the textile industry and stop foreign imports? Those are the claims. Some people think marijuana, or hemp, may be the epitome of Yankee ingenuity. Mr. Jack Herer, for example, is the national director and founder of an organization called HEMP. It's an acronym for Help End Marijuana Prohibition, located in Van Nuys, California. Mr. Herer is the author of a remarkable little book called The Emperor Wears No Clothes, wherein, not surprisingly, Mr. Herer urges the repeal of marijuana prohibition. Mr. Herer is not alone. Throughout the war on drugs, several organizations have consistently urged the legalization of marijuana. High Times Magazine, for example, the National Organization to Reform Marijuana Laws, or NORML for short, and an organization called BAC, the Business Alliance for Commerce in Hemp. But the reasons the pro-marijuana lobby want marijuana legal has little to do with getting high, and a great deal to do with fighting oil giants like Saddam Hussein, Exxon, and Iran. The pro-marijuana groups claim that hemp is such a versatile raw material that its products not only compete with petroleum, but with coal, natural gas, nuclear energy, pharmaceutical, timber, and textile companies. It is estimated that methane and methanol production alone from hemp grown as biomass could replace 90% of the world's energy needs. If they are right, this is not good news for oil interests and could account for the continuation of marijuana prohibition. The claim is that the threat hemp posed to natural resource companies back in the 30s accounts for its original ban. At one time, marijuana seemed to have a promising future as a cornerstone of industry. When Rudolf Diesel produced his famous engine in 1896, he assumed that the diesel engine would be powered by a variety of fuels, especially vegetable and seed oils. Rudolf Diesel, like most engineers then, believed vegetable fuels were superior to petroleum. Hemp is the most efficient vegetable. In the 1930s, the Ford Motor Company also saw a future in biomass fuels. Ford operated a successful biomass conversion plant that included hemp at their Iron Mountain facility in Michigan. Ford engineers extracted methanol, charcoal fuel, tar, pitch, ethyl acetate, and creosote, all fundamental ingredients for modern industry and now supplied by oil-related industries. The difference is that the vegetable source is renewable, cheap, and clean, and the petroleum or coal sources are limited, expensive, and dirty. By volume, 30% of the hemp seed contains oil suitable for high-grade diesel fuel, as well as aircraft engine and precision machine oil. Henry Ford's experiments with methanol promise cheap, readily renewable fuel. And if you think methanol means compromise, you should know that many modern race cars run on methanol. About the time Ford was making biomass methanol, a mechanical device to strip the outer fibers of the hemp plant appeared on the market. These machines could turn hemp into paper and fabrics quickly and cheaply. Hemp paper is superior to wood paper. The first 2 drafts of the U.S. Constitution were written on hemp paper, and the final draft is on animal skin. Hemp paper contains no dioxin or other toxic residue, and a single acre of hemp can produce the same amount of paper as 4 acres of trees. The trees take 20 years to harvest, and hemp takes a single season. In warm climates, hemp can be harvested 2, even 3 times a year. It also grows in bad soil and restores the nutrients. Hemp fiber stripping machines were bad news to the Hearst Paper Manufacturing Division and a host of other natural resource firms. Coincidentally, the DuPont Chemical Company had, in 1937, been granted a patent on a sulfuric acid process to make paper from wood pulp. At the time, DuPont predicted their sulfuric acid process would account for 80% of their business for the next 50 years. Hemp, once the mainstay of American agriculture, became a threat to a handful of corporate giants. To stifle the commercial threat that hemp posed to timber interests, William Randolph Hearst began referring to hemp in his newspapers by its Spanish name, marijuana. This did 2 things. It associated the plant with Mexicans and played on racist fears, and it misled the public into thinking that marijuana and hemp were different plants. Nobody was afraid of hemp. It had been cultivated and processed into usable goods and consumed as medicine and burned in oil lamps for hundreds of years. But after a campaign to discredit hemp in the Hearst newspapers, Americans became afraid of something called marijuana. By 1937, the Marijuana Tax Act was passed, which marked the beginning of the end of the hemp industry. In 1938, Popular Mechanics ran an article about marijuana called New Billion-Dollar Crop. It was the first time the words billion-dollar were used to describe a U.S. agricultural product. Popular Mechanics said, and I'm quoting, "A machine has been invented which solves a problem more than 6,000 years old. The machine is designed to remove the fiber-bearing cortex from the rest of the stalk, making hemp fiber available for use without a prohibitive amount of human labor. Hemp is the standard fiber of the world. It has great tensile strength and durability. It is used to produce more than 5,000 textile products, ranging from rope to fine laces. And the woody herds remaining after the fiber has been removed contain more than 77% cellulose and can be used to produce more than 25,000 products, ranging from dynamite to cellophane." End of quote. Well, since the Popular Mechanics article appeared over half a century ago, many more applications have come to light. But back in 1935, more than 58,000 tons of marijuana seed were used just to make paint and varnish, all non-toxic, by the way. When marijuana was banned, these safe paints and varnishes were replaced by paints made with toxic petrochemicals. In the 1930s, no one knew about poisoned rivers or deadly landfills or children dying from chemicals in house paint. People did know something about hemp back then because the plant and its products were so common. All ships' lines were made from hemp, and much of the sail canvas. In fact, the word canvas is the Dutch pronunciation of the Greek word for hemp, cannabis. All ropes, hawsers, and lines aboard ship, all rigging, nets, flags, and pennants were also made from marijuana stalks, and so were all charts, logs, and Bibles. Today, many of these items are made in whole or in part with synthetic petrochemicals and wood. All oil lamps used to burn hemp seed oil until the whale oil edged it out of first place in the mid-19th century. And then, when all the whales were dead, lamp lights were fueled by petroleum and coal and recently radioactive energy. This may be hard to believe in the middle of a war on drugs, but the first law concerning marijuana in the colonies at Jamestown in 1619 ordered farmers to grow Indian hemp. Massachusetts passed a compulsory grow law in 1631. Connecticut followed in 1632. The Chesapeake colonies ordered their farmers by law to grow marijuana in the mid-18th century. Names like Hempstead or Hemp Hill dot the American landscape and reflect areas of intense marijuana cultivation. During World War II, domestic hemp production became crucial when the Japanese cut off Asian supplies to the U.S. American farmers, and even their sons who grew marijuana, were exempt from military duty during World War II. A 1942 U.S. Department of Agriculture film called Hemp for Victory extolled the agricultural might of marijuana and called for hundreds of thousands of acres to be planted. Despite a rather vigorous drug crackdown, 4-H clubs were asked by the government to grow marijuana for seed supply. Ironically, war plunged the government into a sober reality about marijuana, and that is that it's very valuable. In today's anti-drug climate, people don't want to hear about the commercial potential of marijuana. The reason is that the flowering top of a female hemp plant contains a drug. But from 1842 through the 1890s, a powerful concentrated extract of marijuana was the second most prescribed drug in the United States.